It is your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That's brand new stuff from Annihilator. The name of the tune is Altering the Altar. The name of the new album is From the Demented, and it, of course, comes from the mind of the Demented and the fingers of the Demented, the one and only guitarist of Annihilator, the main man himself, Jeff Waters. Jeff, how are you, man?
Very good, Chris. How you doing?
Excellent, dude. Well, Jeff, I got to tell you right off the jump, man, this record is about as good as Annihilator gets, man. I am truly, truly loving this, and as a fan of the record, I would put this with, with Never Neverland and everything that I love about the band.
Well, I appreciate that. It's when you're sort of the main writer and the main dude in the band, and you put this many studio records. I think this is their 16th studio one, and it's very easy to either repeat yourself or get stale, which happens, to everybody at certain times of their careers, and have some good songs, great songs, classic songs, shitty ones,
right?
Good average ones. So I think just sometimes things come together. If you really want to try every time and do it, eventually you sort of get that, oh, there's a better record than he's done in a while, one of those things. And I think, from judging from this, I can easily, the reaction last month, it's like, okay, I think something special happened here, and I'm already thinking of, how am I going to pass this one on the next record? Just how am I going to avoid a down time after this one?
Sure. Well, and with this one, like so many records in your catalog, it comes at a time where you're, reinventing the Annihilator wheel a little bit. New band, maybe trying to go throwback a little bit, but it doesn't sound like you're trying to mimic your past. Talk about the creative energy that you need. Because it does, and tell me if I'm dead wrong, but it does seem like you work best when everything is a little more chaotic, when there are new members and new vision and new ideas and everything that make Annihilator.
For sure. Well, when Annihilator started back, believe it or not, in late 1984, we didn't have a record out till 89, but when it started, the idea was as a teenager, you're going to have I want to be in a band and I want to get a record deal and I want to be like my heroes or even half as good as my favorite bands. And so I found a singer, wrote a song called Alice in Hell. That didn't actually come out for another 4 years after that. But the whole thing is have a band. That's the thing. And I ended up doing something very weird in the sense that we had this first record called Alice in Hell that went from literally starving, like I was a couple of years of extremely skinny, no food, no money out in Vancouver,
right,
Canada, trying to get this record and record deal and get the record recorded and all this kind of stuff, my first record, blah, 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 and find musicians. And to all of a sudden put a band together, did the record, and it was one of the biggest, I think, if not the biggest metal independent album of the year in 89, apparently. So
sure.
It was kind of like thrown from the bottom to, the top at least in this genre of music at the time for that 1 year. And then our singer left at the last tour for that record. We were touring with Testament in the States, and our singer left. And before the end of the tour, and he'd known he was going to leave, but didn't tell us. And we're all sitting on a tour bus going, "Are you kidding me? We're just at the beginning of this amazing thing that's starting to happen, and all of a sudden the band has to stop because there's no singer." So that was the moment I decided it was going to be a solo project, essentially going under a band name, and I would hire singers and drummers for the studio, play the other instruments myself, and that essentially was the last time Annihilator was really kind of a band, was really only in a year of the demo days, in I think 85, 86,
sure, and
maybe a year for 89, 88 before the album came out. So there was really only a band for 3 years of my entire career. The rest has been kind of a solo thing behind the scenes, and on tour it's an actual real band. It's a bunch of guys getting along, having fun, and it's a band. It's not my show, it's the band, right?
Sure.
But I don't even know, I'm babbling so much I forgot the original question.
I think you covered
I get it with the idea was, for this album was I've been lucky that we haven't been a super big band, and we're not a small band. We've only had real kind of sustained success in Europe and sometimes in Japan. So I've had this sort of weird career where that's where I go. I go 90% of the time it's touring in Europe, and at least every summer festivals and For each album, I'm doing at least 2 headline tours in Europe for that, which is kind of weird. 2 headline tours is not normal, but
sure.
I mean, if you can do it, you do it.
Right.
But I've also had, the benefit of what's been going on for me all these years is I didn't have to really get told by a label, because we weren't a huge band, so it wasn't like a label was saying you have to do this and keep the singer or do this and have this sound or style. And I've had this huge palette of being able to play music that's, goes all the way from love songs, ballads, instrumentals, classical guitar pieces, right through to thrash speed, a little bit of death metal occasionally,
right?
And kind of anything I want to do. And that's artistically, that's amazing. As far as commercially successful everywhere, it's not a good thing,
right.
But it's artistically, I've been able to sustain it, make a living out of it, have a lot of fun, and still do whatever the hell I want. And of course, that brings with it ups and downs. Sometimes you're going to get hit and miss on your songs and albums and even lineups, and sometimes you do something that people go, wow, that is good, or that's better, or, So
right.
On this one, the idea was simply to not do what I did on the last record, which the 2015 record I'm talking about, called Suicide Society, was the record that I've done that's the most clearly obvious when it comes to who my influences are.
Sure.
So you can... The last record a couple of years ago, you could hear where I got everything from. It was just, there was no filter on my writing. It was like, that sounds a little like Kerry King, Jeff Hanneman. I love it. Let's do it. It was like that throughout the whole album mostly. Whereas this time I thought, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to go back to the demo days and the first 4 Annihilator records when people seem to think those first 4 Annihilator records and demos were the best thing and their favorites, right? So, and the same thing for me.
Sure.
And I thought, well, I'm not trying to copy any of that because that's not going to happen, but at least get back to where people would go, hey, that sounds like Waters, that Annihilator dude, or that sounds like Annihilator, rather than who's this band sounding a little bit too much like Megadeth or Hetfield or, that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's where this album was headed, was, okay, let's try this. Instead of being the fanboy Waters being more clearly out there, let's go back to Waters, the more original artist.
Sure, and what's interesting, though, is that no matter what you do, I think, you're always going to get that. Because, first of all, you're always going to get the Megadeth comparison. That's just going to happen forever. But even
I think a lot of that comes 2 things. One is going to come from the Megadeth thing musically only really ever came from when I sang on the last album and from the music side of it. Because on the last album, there was 2 songs that were very clearly... you can tell who one of my favorite bands and singers is, which is Dave Mustaine and Megadeth.
Sure.
And so that, since I didn't have the filter, that just hammered home the Megadeth thing. And people tie that into, mostly in North America. If you go to Wikipedia, you get all the wrong info, at least on my band. But you really, people that haven't heard of us for obvious reasons, we haven't been there, we haven't released albums, done tours. The only way they find out a lot of times here is by seeing something on the internet, and the first thing they hear is, oh, that guy's had 1 million musicians in his band, he must be a real asshole dictator, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So whereas Europeans all these decades have known that, oh yeah, that's Waters, he's got a different guy on this album, let's check it out, see what it's like. If we don't like it, I'm sure maybe we'll like his next album. So that's where the Megadeth kind of comparison started. Plus, it didn't help that Dave Mustaine called me up a few times and asked me to either audition or join the band.
Sure.
So there's another connection there.
Yeah, no doubt, man. But then you listen to other stuff on For the Demented, like I'll point to Pieces of You. Listening to Pieces of You, I immediately heard like a Metallica type of a vibe to it. I mean, you're not hiding where you were saying that this one you were trying to go backwards to, not backwards, but back to the original Annihilator
filtering
sound.
It, yeah, filtering out, showing too blatantly what your influences are. And that's the thing, you could never get rid of that. Why would you? Because there's so many good musicians that you grew up on in metal and hard rock. And everybody that we like is getting, like all the bands you and I like, are getting their music from someone else. It's just some bands come out and say it and honor who they've got everything from, or other bands try to hide it and pretend they're 100% original. But even one of the most original guys in the world, Eddie Van Halen, will tell you Angus Young, Alan Holdsworth, a bit of Page, like he'll come out and say it. So it's kind of like And it's always an interesting thing for sometimes press or people to talk about, oh, that sounds like so-and-so, but there is a difference between being influenced by and, I mean, everybody's influenced by everything they like, right?
Well, sure, exactly. Now, what made you, and you maybe touched on this, but I guess I didn't ask it, so maybe I didn't get a direct answer on it. What made you decide to change direction a little bit with For the Demented from Suicide Society? Were you not satisfied with where you got, or were you bored with where you were, or what?
No, again, like from how the record did, most managers would have, or even label would have said, you got to do the same thing again, just do it a little better, because the last one went up in sales, so you're doing something right. I kind of got the feedback immediately that the press in Europe told me right after the album. They were elbowing me at shows and going, you got away with this one good there, buddy,
Right.
and it was like the only thing I wanted to do different this time was I want to go back to getting it sounding more like what does this Waters guy sort of sound like and been known for the earlier stuff. And that earlier stuff wasn't one album. It was like even a lot of people in North America don't realize Alice in Hell was not our big album, our biggest album. We had one called Never Neverland,
right,
and one called King of the Kill. So the Alice in Hell wasn't the biggest album. It was just the one that North Americans sort of heard first and then never really heard much after that. But there was nothing other than no instrumentals, no ballads, and because Annihilator fans that know us know that, yes, Waters can do the ballads.
Right.
He writes a song about his son or his aunt dying of cancer or a bad relationship or a good relationship or some positive things. Let's just leave out the ballad stuff. And I got to sneak one in because I justified it to Rich in the studio and said, listen, I've got these lyrics that I wrote, and they're really, really horrific lyrics, a true story about a murder, and it's like really bad what was going on with it. It reminds me of like an Alice Cooper nightmare, horror murder kind of thing that happened in real life. And I said, look, if I can squeeze in a ballad type set of music and put these horrific lyrics over top of it, then let's call that accepted, like if it works. And basically the story was a guy, and I think I saw this on one of the U.S. crime TV show, Forensic Files, or not Forensic Files, but one of those other crime shows, ID Channel or whatever we call it.
Okay.
But, basically, a guy killed his girlfriend. He was obviously completely nuts, completely lost his mind, and was basically chopped part of her up and ate her for lunch in a sandwich.
Ugh. So,
and the basic idea behind that was, in his twisted mind, he thought that he could keep her alive inside of him. And who on their right mind would write a song like that? But since I'm not of right mind sometimes, I thought that would be a great contrast to put a beautiful love song music with a lyrical content like that. So that's how I got to sneak in the Pieces of You song. And that is definitely, it's got an Alice Cooper-y meets the Metallica One kind of ballady thing without actually being anything close to anything they've done, but it really gives you that vibe, like you said.
Yeah, definitely does. Now, Jeff, I interviewed you, oh my God, 15, 16 years ago, whatever it's been, but a really long time ago. And it was before the internet and the social media had really taken hold of everything. And you told me then the basic underlying story of why Annihilator did not break huge in the States. And it had to do with the label and the label that you were on, and you didn't have a worldwide deal or something to that effect. And now
I think there's quite a few reasons. Yeah, go ahead though.
The question that I have is, now with the internet being everywhere and kind of taking away the need, I guess, to you don't have to be in a record store in Montana to be heard in Montana anymore. Do you see differences for the good or for the bad in the way it has become? I mean, obviously sales are done, but I mean, do you see a difference in the ability to spread your music now for positive or for negative versus back when you started?
Yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword. It's positive and negative, but again, if you don't even go into what the positives and negatives are, if you're a musician and you love what you're doing and you're in this for life, you're going to work with it. You're going to make it work, right? You're going to do whatever you can to get around the negatives and try to use the positives and all this stuff. But I mean, back when we talked back then, I guess was the internet in? I think it was in. I started playing Doom online or one of these online games in 1996.
Okay.
So, but I guess in the year 2000 and on, I guess was that probably when it really started hitting. But yeah, I think that for young bands, the internet's been fantastic. For bigger bands of all levels, having the internet out there, social media, blah, 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 Facebook. I love Facebook. That's the one I'm always on. I don't really care much about Twitter and Instagram or making sure we're out there. You know, for us, it's been a case of, you know, you alluded to CD sales, or what do you say, are tanked or done or whatever?
They're done. They're over.
Well, you know what? Here's the myth. The myth is that's the North American thing that it may be going on here in North America, but that's not what's going on. If you look at most of the metal bands in the world, guess where they're going in the summertime?
Really?
They're going every year. We're off to Europe.
Okay,
and
right.
The reason we're off to Europe is because while we have, you know, a couple of really great festivals for metal in the summer here in Canada, maybe Heavy MTL and Calgary Metal Fest, and that's almost it for metal bands for big festivals. And the States, of course, have the 80s stuff, the sort of more glammy, you know, stuff. They have the U.S. You guys have, of course, other metal festivals. But when you total them up in all of North America, I don't know what the stats would be on that, but I'm guessing there can't be more than 10 that pull, you know, 20,000 people at each festival a year. I mean, that might be, maybe I'm close, maybe I'm not. But you go to Europe from May to August, and you're going to be able to get on a plane for 99 euros, which is like 110, 115 US dollars.
Right.
And in hours, you can arrive at any country in Europe, literally, and see on any given weekend from May to August, you can pick which bands, which festivals, which lineups you want to see, and there could be 20,000, there could be 100,000. So you're talking like hundreds and hundreds of festivals for hard rock and metal versus maybe less than half a dozen that have 20,000 or more in North America every year. So my point on the sales is, over there, in order to play at all those festivals, guess what you have to have? You have to have CDs in the stores and selling. And that's a totally different ballgame than what's happening over here in North America. And whereas, you know, everybody said CDs are dead, and that's mostly true.
Sure.
But for a career for a metal band to not include Europe in your sort of view, it's like me not including the States. It's like stupid. What am I doing? My home country of Canada, you know? I would be in Canada and the States in a second if I was able to get a deal to come down there to support our tours and get us down. But Europe, for example, a lot of American bands will go over there for the first time and they will be in total shock because they will get somewhere and go, 80,000 people? 50,000, 100,000, you know, like, what is going on here? You mean there's another one this weekend with this many people? And so you can do your whole career over there in the summer as a metal band.
No doubt.
So you have to sell CDs. So that's the other side. You're talking about Canada and the States, but definitely Europe is a complete other side of that when CDs are crucial or you don't get to play on those stages.
Sure. No doubt, man. Now, speaking of the touring, you're obviously getting ready to go to Europe, going out with Death Angel and Testament, which what a killer show that is for anybody that's going there to play on a tour like that. And not that you would ever be intimidated, because you know you're not. But I mean, those are both bands that bring it every single night. Does that help you and your band raise the bar, or do you come out and destroy every night and really wouldn't matter who's in front of you?
No, it's just you go out and have fun no matter who it is. And in this case, it's not as much of a big deal as you think playing with Testament and Death Angel, because our first tour was with Testament and we've been playing with them off and on at shows and festivals for, I guess, since 1989 we've been playing with. So they're like our friends. What does kick our ass, and Death Angel always are like supreme energy live shows and fun. You know, they're just a blast. So you got those two bands are just legendary live. You know, it's more the package. It feels like 1989 or something, like something you'd see going through the States in '89, where you'd have like Exodus, Megadeth, and Slayer, or you'd have Testament, Priest, and Anthrax. So like it's one of those kind of vibes over in Europe right now, where it's kind of playing huge venues and selling out. So much so that there's talk of it going into the next year and all this kind of stuff. So it's more like the package, and I think I don't think Testament, Death Angel, or Annihilator have any this stage of our career. We don't have that. I don't think we have that young sort of competition vibe. I mean, no matter how much you think there is, it's more like, hey, this is a package. We got to live up to our third of the package. You know what I mean?
Sure, definitely. Now,
but yeah, we're going to still have a blast like we always do. You know, I mean, 51 years old playing metal and on the 16th record and doing well, and making a living. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
what a life.
Yeah, no doubt. You're not in the cubicle.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, Jeff, you and I know you're aware of this. You were named number 3 guitarist of all time in our friend Joel MacGyver's book, greatest metal guitarist of all time. A, do you believe that? And B,
no.
What do you think when you see appreciation of your playing, recognized that way?
Appreciation is amazing. That's like it's with all the negative things in the business side of being a musician, and the things how being a musician can affect your personal life, and from marriages to traveling to health, just all the negatives, which you don't want to dwell on. When positive things are happening, like even one journalist says, I like this record, writes a review, and then says why he likes the record. And it's not because the label's pushing them to write it nice, or they say something nice. Things right there to certain things fans say, to somebody remembering us from a place like Canada or the States and saying and wanting to do an interview, for example. Those things are like totally yes. I mean, these are all positive things, and you feel good about it.
Sure.
The negative stuff you just sort of ignore,
right?
Because what else could you do, right?
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, Annihilator is basically, and myself are just basically a compilation, a mesh together of my favorite bands and guitar players from all kinds of different musics, from hard rock to all kinds of metal and stuff like that. So it's like, the way I put all my influences together works on certain records and songs, and that clicks with certain people sometimes, and musicians from other bands, whether they're older bands than us or well-known ones, or to young bands that are just starting out. Sometimes I actually had well-known people come up to me and say nice things, right? I won't even go farther, otherwise I look like I'm showing off. But it's amazing. You just don't let it go to your head, but you sort of fill up that hole of all the shitty things that go on to keep a band going. You know what I mean? That fills the hole and makes it kind of almost worthwhile. And you put them all together with the touring and the fans and the traveling and the culture that you get to, old friends from old days overseas, and the foods and the coffees and and the paychecks sometimes, and it's just all it's all positive, right?
No doubt, man. Now let me address one rumor about you, and you can tell me that it's straight up false. It's something that I've heard. And I've just heard it floated around, and I have no idea if it's real or not. But
make it up if you do. Yeah, go ahead.
If it is real, you don't have to tell me who it's about. But the rumor has always been that kind of on the slide, on the underground, you've written like pop ballads and country hits for like a lot of successful artists. Is there any truth at all to that?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, and that's it?
Well, I had Annihilator's downtime was where we still had enough sales overseas in Japan to get a record deal and tour, but I had to get a second job. Oh, poor Jeff, eh? Poor Jeff. So I think it was 97 to 2007. So in that 10-year gap, I was doing a lot of studio work.
Okay.
And most of that studio work was I do mixing and mastering, and I'm okay at that. I'm not great, but I'm okay at it. And maybe play some solos on people's records.
Sure.
But what I found was I met a writer from Nashville who was a well-known songwriter for country and pop stuff, and we were sitting in basically a bar. We were just finished a tour in '92 with a band called Judas Priest on their Painkiller tour.
Wow.
And
nice.
that was we done 2-3 months in Europe with them, and I was still a kid then, 24 years old, I think. And an unknown support act called Pantera was opening up.
Wow.
And within, of course, months after that tour, they started to become one of the biggest bands in history in metal.
Sure.
but they were kind of unknown. They were unknown basically at the time. So I was in this bar waiting to transfer planes from Frankfurt to Chicago or something to Vancouver, and the flight was canceled. The weather, had to stay overnight at the hotel, so I met this guy in a bar who came up to me and said, "You must be a musician," one of these things, right? Mm-hmm. And talked to him and blah, blah, blah. I'm young, full of myself, telling him we just toured with Judas Priest and all this stuff. And then I finally realized I should ask him what he does. Long story short, he's a huge hit writer.
Okay.
So he just said, we should write a song, and he says, I got a guitar in my room. You want to grab a beer, and we'll go up a Heineken and go up and write. So we wrote a song, and then instantly, as soon as we wrote that first song together, it was like, all right, I think we got something. He's in Nashville, I'm in Vancouver.
Okay.
He says, you send me your ballads.
Huh, wow.
And your 80s cliche metal ballads.
Okay.
And they were cliche metal ballads from Bon Jovi to Warrant to, that kind of vibe.
All right.
And he would take them into Nashville with session players and singers and turn this metal kids' ballads into country ballads.
Okay.
So he was like, trust me, it'll work. A good song's a good song, doesn't matter what kind of music. And he would change them into country ballads, have session singer, guys or girls sing on it, and he basically sell it off, or not sell it, but just get it to a lot of big names in pop and country. So that was basically how I kept Annihilator going for 10 years.
So it was lyrics more than arrangements?
I did zero lyrics. I was
okay.
100% music, and he was 100% lyrics.
Okay. All right. I've heard that rumor around, and I'll be honest, I never believed. I was like, Jesus, this guy writes way too heavy music to be writing country hits.
Well, I was so worried about it because of my past in the 80s.
Right.
When I don't know what it was like in different states or cities in the U.S. And it was different in Canada depending on where you were. But in my city of Ottawa, if you were wearing a Skid Row or a Bon Jovi shirt, like a Bon Jovi shirt, Skid Row is a little later. If you were wearing something like a Bon Jovi shirt, then the kids wearing a Slayer shirt or a Venom shirt would literally sometimes even get into fights or spit on the Bon Jovi poser.
Sure.
And looking back, it was so funny because, stupid and funny because if you look back at Annihilator, but go farther back to Slayer's early promo shots, and we were all wearing fucking makeup and poofy gelled hair.
Right.
And wristbands and boots. And, we were all doing the same thing those guys were doing, except we just called it real metal.
Right.
So that carried on out of the 80s to me, so that when I started doing this sort of country pop kind of stuff, I did not want to use my name and say what I was doing because I had a feeling that a lot of my European, especially crowd, and was going to... You know what they were going to say.
Right.
Poser,
right. No
sellout, commercial sellout. And it was like, if you only knew that the reason I do this stuff is because I want to keep playing music that I like to play in Annihilator.
Sure.
So, there you go.
Too funny, man. Well, dude, the new album does not sound like a country record at all. It is called For the Demented. It is as smoking as Annihilator gets. And Jeff, as a tradition on the show, we always end with a new track from the album, and we'll let you pick it. What would you like us to wrap with, and maybe tell us a quick story about it?
Well, I think this is the non-metal, as in the heavier end of metal song. Okay. But I want to play this one if I could because it's that cross between that really disgusting, sick lyrical theme meeting a Metallica, Alice Cooper, Annihilator type ballad music in behind it. And I think it's just like a total contrast. Give it a listen because it's one of those songs where when we heard it the first time, we weren't sure, and then later on, we and other people that heard it went, holy crap, what a really special kind of sounding song. So this is called Pieces of You.
All right, let's check it out right now. It's Pieces of You. It is Annihilator right here on your Classic Metal Show.